Kent Knechtel grew up in Port Dover, a fishing community in southern Ontario on the shores of Lake Erie. He was a golf course superintendent who decided to shift careers. He started working aboard freighters and loved the move from the land to the lakes.
When you're out there, you're like, it's like freedom. And everybody that you work with becomes like a family member. You're all one big family. It was awesome. I loved it.
Kent started his sailing career as a deckhand 20 years ago. His first job was on the Michipicoten, a 698-foot freighter that was built to carry iron ore from one side of Lake Superior to the other.
It was a narrower boat. It rolled a lot. You could feel the roll a lot. It pitched a lot. So that was a big thing with it. A lot of guys get seasick, like I don't. It doesn't bother me one bit.
Kent sailed on a few other ships as he worked his way up the ladder. In 2018, he returned to the Michipicoten as the ship's second engineer. The Michipicoten was one of the largest ships on the Great Lakes when it was built in 1952 for the Interlake Steamship Company. At the time, she was named the Elton Hoyt II. The Canadian company, Lower Lakes Towing, acquired the Hoyt in 2003 and renamed it the Michipicoten, after a river in northern Ontario. Her usual route took her along the cliffs of the Big Lake, navigating the ever-changing waters of Lake Superior.
It's a tough lake to work on. Like, it could be calm, like not calm, but 1-footers, and then you turn around and you got 10-footers. It turns on you in a heartbeat.
June 8, 2024 was an unusually quiet day on Lake Superior. Winds were 9 to 10 knots out of the west, only 1-foot waves, and the visibility was good.
It was the calmest day I've seen on that lake. I've never seen Lake Superior that flat.
In the early morning hours, the Michipicoten, loaded with iron ore, was bound from Two Harbors, Minnesota, on her way to the Algoma Steel Mill in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario. She was about 38 miles southwest of Isle Royale when the crew discovered a problem. Freighters like the Michipicoten carry ballast water in their holds to keep the boat stable when they're empty. But the Michipicoten wasn't empty. Kent was on watch when he got a call from the ship's mate. There was water in the ballast of the ship.
I said, well, we got 20,000-ton iron ore on board. There should be no water in this boat. So I brought the ballast screen up on the computer, and there's 4 feet of water in there. I said, that's weird. I said, well, whatever, I'll go down and get the ballast. I'll pump this water out. I looked over at the list meter, and I saw we had about a 5-degree list at that time. That means the boat's leaning to one side. So just in that short a time, I didn't even get out of the control room door. The phone rings again, and it's the captain. He says, we're taking on water. I look at the screen, it's now at 7 feet. Within about a half a minute, it had gone up that much.
When the ship lists with a full cargo, the cargo rolls to one side, making even a small 5-degree list a potential threat.
I hung up, I ran down, I got all the ballast valves opened up, I got the pump going, and I was gone maybe 4 or 5 minutes at the most out of the control room. And when time I got back up to the control room, I looked at the screen, it was at 11'9", and I said, this isn't good.
Water was coming in faster than the Michipicoten could pump it out. Kent called the bridge and spoke to the captain.
I told him, I said, we're not going to keep up to this water. We're going to have to call a mayday. And then I looked again, and we were now at 14 and a half feet in that short a time.
At 6:46 a.m., the U.S. Coast Guard received a distress call from the Michipicoten. Aboard the ship, the captain instructed the crew to get their survival suits on. That's when Kent encountered a crew member from his hometown who was struggling, and not just with his gear.
I kind of feel connected to this guy. And I went over and I grabbed him and I said, come on, man, I got to get your suit on you. So I got a suit on him, and tears are running down his face. He's panicking. And I said, you get your together or you die today. You got a choice.
This type of emergency is uncommon on the Great Lakes. But the loss of the Edmund Fitzgerald proves that tragedies can happen. But the Fitz sank during a powerful November storm. Would the Michipicoten go down almost half a century later on a calm day in June? Aboard the freighter, nobody knew for certain. The chief engineer on the Michipicoten had only been on board for 3 days, so the task of keeping the ship upright rested with Kent, the second engineer. His job, keeping the engines running so the pumps would keep working. The ship was listing at 15 degrees when Kent headed back to the engine room to start another auxiliary pump. He stopped briefly to reach out to his wife Janet and his son Nick.
I had no cell service at all. I sent her a text. I said, if anything happens, remember I love you and Nick. Then I wrote a note in the control room. I wrote a note. Just said, tell God I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And then the next thing, I was up on deck again, and I saw the American Coast Guard coming, and then there's another freighter out there.
That freighter was the Edwin H. Gott, one of the Great Lakes 1,000-footers. She was about 15 miles away from the Michipicoten when the distress call went out. At 8:42, she arrived on the scene. She was the first vessel to reach the Michipicoten.
Coast Guard 136, sector Northern on 2 and Alpha. Talk to you for 5 minutes. Sector out.
At 9:13 a.m., the response boat from the Coast Guard station in Bayfield, Wisconsin arrived on the scene, followed by the National Park Service vessel Peregrine and a Jayhawk helicopter from the station in Traverse City, Michigan. Lieutenant Joseph Snyder is with the United States Coast Guard station in Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan, that coordinated the response to the Michipicoten.
So feeling, still very apprehensive because the vessel was still actively taking on water, but it looked like they were stabilized. And then at about 10 o'clock, they updated us and let us know they were still taking on water and were making preparations to abandon ship. And that's when everybody's hair really stood on end, and we realized that we might have a really, really substantial incident on our hands.
The ballast tanks run along the bottom and sides of the ship and can go up to 25 feet in depth. The water stopped at 19 feet 8 inches when the pressure in the tanks matched the pressure of the lake. But according to Kent, if any more water came in and the waves increased, the ship would twist, causing a bulkhead to crack. If that happened, the Michipicoten could roll over or split apart.
Everything should stay right there. As long as the vessel doesn't twist, the bulkhead should stay in place, because it's the pressure in that tank that will blow out them bulkheads.
The decision was made to evacuate non-essential crew members. At 10:24 a.m., 11 of the 22 crew members were transferred by ladder to the U.S. Coast Guard response boat. The Michipicoten headed slowly to Thunder Bay, Ontario, the closest port that was available to her. She was escorted by both the U.S. and Canadian Coast Guards, which provided some comfort to those crew members still on the ship.
Lake Superior is a very cold lake. I've never saw that lake the whole time I've been up there get above 64 degrees. You're not going to last long in that water, even in a survival suit. You got a chance, but you also have a chance of dying. The Coast Guard's there, they're staying right with us. We're fine in that respect. If we do go in the water now, at least they're there to pick us up.
At 7 p.m. that evening, nearly 12 hours after the first distress call, the Michipicoten limped into the harbor in Thunder Bay. In the days that followed, divers were able to determine that the Michipicoten had sustained a 13-foot crack in her hull, likely a stress fracture. The crack was patched, and the decision was made to sail the boat to Duluth for further repairs, not tow it.
Michipicoten will be inbound Duluth entrance harbor here, going through Duluth Piers in approximately 15 minutes.
On June 20, the Michipicoten arrived at the harbor in Duluth and was met with cheers from a crowd that had been following her plight. But Kent Knechtel never heard the cheers. He wasn't on board the Michipicoten.
They asked the crew to take it back to Duluth, and I said, not me. Not after what I went through. I'm not doing it. A lot of guys did. Some of the guys left, But there was no way I was doing it. Like, there was no reason for anybody to take that they could have towed it. And I said, I'm not doing that. They couldn't have paid me $1 million to take it. I said, that ain't happening.
No.
Kent says the experience he had aboard the Michipicoten has stayed with him.
After we got to Thunder Bay, I was stable, I was fine. And then I started having nightmares of the boat rolling over and I'm hanging off the side of it. And then I called my son the one night, and I was talking to him before I went to bed. And that night I had a dream that he was on the deck, and I had to reach down and grab him before he went in the water. And that's when I said, that's it.
Kent chose to retire early, and he's vowed never to sail the Great Lakes again. He says he often thinks about that June morning when Lake Superior was so calm. What if it hadn't been?
Well, we wouldn't be sitting here. Plain and simple. It ended up with it had a 13-foot crack under it, and it would have progressed right across that. It would have split that boat.
According to Transport Canada, the regulatory agency of the Canadian government, the Michipicoten has not been cleared to resume operations. Her future is uncertain. We haven't been able to confirm with her owner, the Canadian shipping company, Lower Lakes Towing, if she will ever sail again. For now, she's in a Wisconsin shipyard. And Kent? Well, he's still working on engines, smaller ones now, and back on land.
It's changed my attitude towards life. I'll tell you that. It gives you more respect for everybody around you. Yeah, it changes you. But in the respects of living my life, I just know I got a lot more time to play golf.